the May deadline. And I think that's it with one exception. That wasn't really on your ask list, but I'm gonna mention it anyway, just because I think it might impact some of the proposals, and that is that there was a presentation at the council meeting from the fire department, and basically they're requesting a large amount of additional money. Their original request was for like 19.7% increase, and they've agreed to reduce that to like 12.9%. But 12.9%, you know, it's going to make it, I think, very difficult for the village not to increase the millage rate from 9% to cover that. And in addition, in deferring some of their initial requests to the next year, it means that their next year's request is going to be higher as well. So I just bring that up because I know there have been comments, and I think even one of the proposals we were going to hear tonight suggested we just increase the mills by 3%. I'm just saying that it might be relevant to know that we might not have the whole 3 mills to work with.
Sharing it with the fire department.
Right, exactly. So that, unless people have questions, I'll be quiet now.
Okay. Any responses or any, was everybody there? I wasn't at the council meeting.
I listened to it. I wasn't present, but I did join. It was quite a healthy discussion. It lasted, surprisingly, it probably lasted just the roast part of it, close to an hour. So there's a lot of questions among the council members being asked. But I'm not sure I have a lot to add to what Kurt said, other than there's just a lot of concern over rising costs in general, over rising costs from the fire department, maybe from the police department. And, you know, that just puts more pressure on where the money could come from for the road.
So the police didn't present, they didn't make requests for.
No, I think that the chief in a prior meeting had said that they were going to request, like, I think it was in the 4% range.
4.2.
In the 4.2% range this year. Yeah.
All right.
Well, doesn't a certain portion of the increases get handled by yearly assessments?
Yes. If the millage rate stays the same, as I recall, assessments can go up. I mean, they go up the lesser of some sort of inflation rate capped at 5%. And this year, I think they would probably go up 5%. I'm not sure. There may be an additional house or two coming in, you know, that might actually increase it a little bit more, but they're not going up 12%.
Just out of curiosity, when was the last time the fire department asked for an increase?
Well, they ask for an increase every year, like 3 or 4%.
It's never been that high.
But it's not been anything near this.
Well, you know, over the past month or two, we've been in the fact finding mode, trying to get as much information as possible, and this is pretty good input. You know, it's not pleasant, but it's good to have this input. Okay. For the presentations tonight, the first one is from Municipal Bond Expert. Is that okay to call you an municipal bond expert?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I hope after 40 years, I'm an expert. I apologize. I do have a couple copies. So one's a really bad color. I tried to print them out at home and my printer. No, I put in cartridges in there and it just didn't work. It's like this, so I went and got yours printed. Like mine is all really bad. So, my name is Carrie Blanchett. I am Managing Director for PFM Financial Advisor. I manage the Michigan practice for the firm. We are a national financial advisory firm specializing in primarily governmental, not-for-profit. We work with, anything from townships and villages all the way up to the state of Michigan, probably enough Michigan Department of Transportation, universities, hospitals, helping them, figure out how to finance one of the primary areas we focus on, how to finance their capital needs. So I know that's a lot of information. There's probably some of the pages that are more focused on this committee than others. But we've been spending, as you might expect, a lot of time talking about roads here in Michigan for the past 4 or 5 years. So, we had some of these slides already done, so we just kept them in there. What we normally start with is just talking about what sources of revenues the village can use to pay for roads. In that first slide, the first one, general operating funds. That is using money that you have in your fund balance, such as the $3 million. Or using a portion of the millage rate, and I know you just mentioned the millage, the village levied 9 mills, but it's authorized to levy up to, at least last year, 12.0727 mills. So you have about 3 mills left of remaining buffer, if you will, that the village could increase its millage rate. We really would caution, the village against going all the way up there, because some of that needs to be used for, unexpected events. We're talking about police, fire. There's other things that the village is responsible for. So I think trying to take everything and just dedicate it to roads, something's going to have to give in the future. Also, as the tax base increases, to the extent it increases greater than the rate of inflation, the millage rates roll back. So the maximum you can levy will go down over time, as it has over the past, over many years. There is the ability for the village to put in front of the voters a Headley override to go, take it back up to the 20, I think it's a 20 mil maximum. But those don't pass very frequently in the state of Michigan. So I could probably count it in one hand how many times in my career I've seen them pass.
And you're referring to any type of tax increase at all?
Headley override
Okay, Headley
specifically,
override.
there's, in my experience, public safety is a millage that passes with a pretty great passage rate. Roads have actually been another thing, because people are very frustrated because they're tired of losing their, tires and everything like that. But that just goes under that general operating. So whether it's cash that the village has built up, or something that it can sort of set aside from its operating budget, or increasing the millage. And with increasing the millage, and we'll get into that later in this presentation, you could do a pay-as-you-go, or you could, bond and then use that revenue to pay back that service. The next bullet is the way, many units do capital improvements, especially when you have very limited resources. For example, a school, schools in Michigan have really no other source, because the operating dollars are to, educate students. So when they need something on their facilities, they typically put that for a vote of the public. And so a voted debt issue, you're voting the bond amount, you're voting the project cost. So you come up with a project cost, the voters see that on the ballot, and you describe what the purpose of the ballot is, and then you have to put an estimate of what the millage is that would be needed to service that debt service. That's an estimated millage. It can change based on what your actual taxable value is. So we normally use conservative assumptions in doing those estimates. So typically the millage rate over time ends up being less than what is in that ballot. But it is a way to do that, and it's called an unlimited tax general obligation bond because the village has the right to levy whatever it needs to pay for that debt service. The example I give oftentimes is if half of the village burned down, your bond payment doesn't change. So that means you would have to double your millage rate to pay that debt service. On the flip side, if we saw a year where something happened, you had some huge new homes go in and the taxable value went up, the village would have to reduce the millage rate because the millage needed to pay that debt service payment would be less. The third item, the option is special assessment bonds, and this was really common in the 80s. I would say for roads and for sidewalks, where you assess the benefiting properties. So that means if you were to do one road, the properties along that road that benefit from that road, would be assessed for that road. Some communities decide that they might share a portion of that cost. I know Farmington Hills did that with some special assessment bonds, probably 3-4 years ago. They've done it actually quite frequently. But we don't see as much of this anymore because the roads are so expensive right now to do. I know, for example, my subdivision really needs roads. And the assessments came back really high, and not everyone could afford it. So it's, majority vote, the majority can, carry it or shoot it down.
Can I ask one question
Sure.
about that, if I can interrupt you? And that is, when they do the special assessments for the roads, do they do it based on just houses? Or do they do it based on frontage?
It's more common to do it on front footage, but I've seen probably over the past 10 to 15 years, governmental entities doing a combination of both, because otherwise, one, and the vote goes by front footage too. So if you have one property that's gonna pay the majority of that, they can, sort of say no for everyone. But if, the reality is everyone's driving on that road to get to their home. So there's sort of a give and take, but in the end, the village, I think the supervisor or manager would end up, having to certify that assessment was fair to the property. So it's just a methodology that you would have to determine is fair and equitable to all properties.
Thank you.
So not knowing what the composition, I would assume it varies depending on what area you're in. The next area is gas and weight tax receipts. So this is more common in larger cities where they get a lot of gas and weight tax receipts, where they can take that money and they can pledge up to 50% of the annual gas and weight tax receipts to bond payments. And the theory for the state in only pledging 50% is they want you to be able to use, they want that other 50% maintained to maintain your roads. And most communities now are saying we need that full amount it doesn't even come close to maintaining our roads. So we don't see a lot of gas and weight tax financings anymore. The second to last there really isn't applicable to you. If you were to have a tax increment district, like a downtown development authority or someone like that, or a tax increment district, you could create a district, capture taxes, including school taxes and other taxes, and then use that for improvements within the district. Or you can use a combination of all of these. Is there any questions on that? The next page just gives you an overview of the village's capacity, should the village want to issue bonds to pay for the road improvements, what the capacity of the village is to issue debt. So the village can issue debt for up to 10% of its state equalized value. Now, there are some adjustments that have been made to that because of this state, the elimination of the personal property tax and shifting that over. So they've made adjustments where we can take some revenue sharing payments, make that an equivalent value, add it to the state equalized value to get you a little bit more. So when we add that in, the total value is 261 million. So roughly $26 million is the total debt that the village can have outstanding, unless the debt is exempt from this limitation, and certain debts are exempt from the limitations. The village has just under $800,000 in debt outstanding. So the village has $25 million of capacity to issue debt. Now, legal capacity to issue debt doesn't mean the village has the ability to service the debt, to pay the debt service. So, the village isn't gonna issue debt unless there's a revenue source in place to pay the bond payments.
Sorry to interrupt once again. Where did you come up with the $791,000 in debt outstanding?
There might be a drain or a county issue that the village is.
That's a,
Oh, that's that drain thing.
that's the Evergreen Farmington.
All right, thank you.
That's,
Because at first it showed up zero, and then we dug into it and there was some little amount.
Thank you.
So the village doesn't have any direct debt of its own.
Correct.
Now, for the type of bonds the village can issue, the most common type of debt for a Michigan local government to issue is a capital improvement bond. Capital improvement bonds can be issued for pretty much any type of capital improvement for a Michigan local unit. Roads, buildings, water, sewer. It requires a notice of intent to be adopted and published so that the taxpayers have the right to, if they get a petition, to bring it to a vote of the public. Capital improvement bonds are limited to 5% of your SED, so it's half of that number. The next one, voted unlimited tax general obligation bonds. That's what we talked about before. You vote the bond, you put it, it goes on the ballot, and the voters are asked, shall the village issue, let's say, not to exceed $20 million for the purpose of road improvements. The estimated millage is X, and the average millage over the term is Y. And the maximum term of the issue is, of any one bond term, is, let's say, 15 years. That doesn't mean the levy is 15 years. It means if you do it in, let's say, 4 series of bonds and each is 15 years, the term of the levy might be 20 years, for example. The city of Southfield did that with their roads. So their $100 million bond was done that way. It was over multiple years, multiple series. And again, you're voting the millage needed to pay the debt. The next one is the Michigan Transportation Fund bonds. That's where you pledge your gas and weight tax receipts. That really isn't meaningful to you. And special assessment bonds is the last one listed there. So in that one, only, you create districts and you do it over time as you do the road projects, and the people on those roads pay for it. So if the village were to want to finance road improvements, what we put on this slide 5, is just how the financing amounts determined. And we focused on the two different cases or two cost estimates we were given. There was one that was called the selective case. I assume you've seen that.
Yes.
And the other one was long-term rehab plan. So we took the cost, which was 9 million or 15 million, depending on which option it was. We added the estimated issuance cost, which for the smaller option was 166,000, for the bigger one was 331,000. I should mention for the long-term rehab option, we assumed that those would be sold in 2 series of bonds, because that would be a lot of road projects to try to do over a short time period, so you would want it spread out. When you issue bonds, you have to have a reasonable expectation to expend those proceeds within 3 years. So you can only issue what you can spend in 3 years. If you want to issue those bonds as tax exempt obligations. And then we're required to account for any estimated investment income on those bond proceeds, because you're not going to spend all the money, day one, it'll be spent over time. We used ultra conservative numbers here. We only used 1.5%. Right now you can get 5%, but who knows what it's going to be 4 years down the line, or 5 years down the line. And then last, we deducted the $3 million that the village had indicated that it plans on putting in for the road projects. So the bond amount, ranged from the $6,055,000 for the selective case to $12,190,000 for the long-term rehab.
Would those costs include legal, the issuance costs?
That has the legal, financial, all the rating fee, the bond insurance. We just assumed bond insurance because you're not rated yet. The underwriter's fee, just, for the firm that actually sells the bonds to the individual investors. State filing fees, name it, there's a whole list of things in that cost. So what we did on our financial analysis is we focused the bond options in 2 sort of buckets. The first was the voted unlimited tax bond that would have a dedicated, voted millage, debt millage that went along with it. And then because you had that 3 mil, what we call margin within your current limitation, we did a non-voted option too, but in that option, we only used 2.5 mils of your 3 mils, which personally I still feel is a little bit on the high side to use, because you just don't know what's going to happen in the future. So what we did on the options is we showed bond terms of 10, 15, and 20 years. Now, when you issue bonds, you cannot issue them for longer than the useful life of the project. So the engineer would have to sort of certify to, whatever the road improvements that are being done would have to be good enough to do the 20-year term, for example. Now, we have plenty of road projects that go 20 years, but we normally don't see them go over 20 years. Because we live in Michigan. So. And this next page, I try to narrow it down. I know it's a lot of numbers. This is the numbers my office wanted to send you. And so I said, no, we're not doing that. We're gonna do this, more simplified. So I apologize. I know it's a lot of numbers, but we've put them into 3 buckets there. The green is the base, project at the $6,055,000 over 10, 15, or 20 years. We've added a interest rate buffer of just over 0.5% over, probably actually a little bit more than 0.5% over current rates. Because interest rates change all the time. We have used a taxable value growth rate for the first 3 years of 3% and then 2% thereafter. This year, I would guess you're gonna see 5% because that's what the CPI is. So chances are when these are up, you get your actual taxable value, these will be a little better than what we're showing. But if you look at that first set of schedules for the $6 million bond, which is the $9 million project, it ranges anywhere from an average millage of 185 for the 20-year term to the 316 for the, I'm sorry. Yeah, 316 for the 10-year term. Because 10 years, you're pushing everything into less time. And then when you step up to the expanded project, that's the $12,190,000 in financing to get to the $15 million project. You range from 341 for 20 years to 5.26 for 10 years. And then at the bottom is where we just showed you what we thought you could get in bond proceeds if you were to use 2.5 mils of the village's operating millage. So at 10, 15, 20-year terms. So it's 4.7 million for the 10-year term, 6.56 million at the 15-year term, and just under 8 million for the 20-year term.
And just ask a question, at the end of the term, you're assuming full bond repayments, right?
Well, so we repay the bonds over the life of the issue.
Over the life of the issue.
So if I were to have shown you the graph
Yeah.
on the voted bond one, it would go down just slightly, over that time, but not materially. But what will really happen in that one is as your tax base grows greater than the 2% or 3%, the millage rate will go down at a faster pace.
Okay.
Where under that last set, the little orange or yellow or whatever that is at the bottom, depending on what color it came out in yours.
Yeah.
That one, assuming the millage didn't get rolled back, you'd still be levying your 2.5 mils and probably, using the excess to,
To pay down.
yeah.
Can I say a question?
Mhm.
So the first year of millage says 3.2 mils,
Mhm.
and the average annual payments are 736,000.
Mhm.
According to the document that you provided, Ken,
Mhm.
3 mils is the $586,000 per year.
It grows over time.
Well, it's
That's
586 is what we were told by the treasurer right now. If we raised,
That was the first year.
yeah, I'm just comparing the first year, right?
Well, your taxable value is $210 million. So
I'm just going by what the
So
treasurer
1
told
mil
us
should
here.
be $210,000. So, we can, compare that, but that's what we have for your taxable value. We can change it if the
What did you
taxable value
say
is
the
not that.
tax, what did you say 1 mil is worth?
210,000.
We have it at 196, is that what it says?
195.
Because does that 210, does that include personal property taxes? Do you know?
That's your tax, that is real and personal, that you levy taxes on, it's not what's exempt.
I think the figures that the treasurer gave us, not Ken, but just to make it clear, the treasurer gave us, I think, was just real property.
Oh, for the assessment stuff. Yeah, because it's different if you do an assessment, because it's only on real property.
And that's not what it reads here on this page.
On
This is
this,
the page. No,
okay,
It's not something that you have in front of you.
yeah, this is something.
So that's 2023. This is 2024, is that correct?
no, it's with it, we started on we don't have 24s yet.
Okay.
So we
Okay.
started using 23 and then we used a 3% growth for that. and I'm not sure if they were using real property only, but when you do a voted debt, that millage is applied to everything, not just real property. And your operating millage is also applied to all property, not just real property. So let's circle back on that because we can update it if something is different, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
that's-
trying to reconcile what you have here versus what the treasurer has provided us.
yeah, cause I definitely, cause if we need to change these, this is what we received from.
Yeah,
like the
but even
county,
at
from
two
the
hundred and ten
villages.
thousand, that still isn't enough to cover the 736. About 3.2 mils,
You have to multiply, yeah,
still not enough to cover it, but.
but then you have to put the inflationary increase.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm just doing that first.
I'm
year's
with you,
payment,
because
yeah.
it sounds like there's a disconnect there.
Thank you.
And then the next page is just to give you an idea of what taxpayer impact would be at those millage rates. Now, every home gets their assessment notice. You have your state equalized value, which should be roughly 50% of the market value of your house. And then there's taxable value. If you've been in your house for a long time, your taxable value is likely quite a bit lower than your assessed value. Your taxes are based on your taxable value. So I always say, when you're talking to public, people in the public, make sure that they look at the taxable value when they're trying to figure out what it would cost them. And, then just look up on here what the taxable value of the house is, or if yours is multiple of these numbers, then multiply it, but it just shows you, like, for a $500,000 taxable value, that first one, 3.2 mils, is $1,800 per year. And that's really on the first year's dollars. So as the value increases for their house, that's a cost for a $500,000 taxable value. So if your house goes up by 3% each year, 5% or whatever, and the millage stays the same, you'll be paying a little bit more each year.
So this assessment was based on what was the annual CPI over the term of the loan?
3 years at 3%, and the rest of it's 2%.
Okay. For the 10, 15, and 20?
And you, this year, I would expect you're gonna see at least 5%, I would think, because CPI is 5%. So you'd have the 5% plus whatever new construction.
No,
plus-
I'm talking about the financial calculation. So the mills is one thing, but, the payback and the increase in taxable value, I meant when I said CPI, is like, you're assuming 3, and then 2% increase in taxable value from there on out.
Right.
Okay.
So if it grows greater than that, the millage would be less.
Yeah.
And then the last page, just try to take, the village can also just, choose to use, the current operational millage that it has, the 2.5 mils, or a different millage. The only caveat I would say is you need to talk to the village attorney to see what your charter allows. Because I know some of the cities and villages we've been talking to had limitation issues where they weren't able to add an additional millage because they were sort of at their cap. But what we did is we took millages ranging from 2 mils to 5 1/4. And we just said, okay, at a present value basis, what would that bring in over a 5-year period, a 10-year period, 15 or 20 year at assuming a 4% discount rate. So the thought process there is, it gets you back into today's dollars because the cost of projects go up over time.
Mhm.
So you can see all the numbers there. I'm not going to go through all of them, but what we tried to do on the right-hand side in the shading is try to pick the numbers from the table before that most closely related to what the outcome was in that particular line. So for the 2 mil option, for the 20-year millage term, it's producing 7,151,000 as compared to a 1.85 mil levy for the voted bond producing 6 million over 20 years. And it changes. So the bottom one, I had them put in the odd number, the 5.25, because the millage on that one for the bond was 5.26 mils, producing 12 million. And that's for 12 years because it's two series. So you have the 10 years, then 2 years later, 10 years. So it's really a 12-year millage. But over the 10-year number, it's 10,312,000. So it'd be about the same if you added extra 2 years to it. So it sort of balances out, and there's no right answer. It's just what you prefer to do. And we used the same taxable value growth rates on this because in order to compare apples to apples, it was appropriate to do that. I mean, the upside you would have on the pay-as-you-go if you voted a millage and you were able to do that is if your tax base grew greater, then you would, be collecting more revenue. The last thing, we're not even there yet. This is just the bond process, which takes about 12 weeks, the bigger time period process. So this process would be applicable if the village were to decide to do the non-voted, just levy, let's say 2 mils of extra and, get whatever you can up front and issue bonds and do as much road work as you can within that. This would be part of that process. If you go for a voted bond, like we were talking about earlier, you're setting your numbers here pretty quick for your vote in November. So you couldn't, you wouldn't be looking, I think we assumed that the bonds wouldn't be issued until March, the first tranche until March of 25, because you wouldn't even be in a position to do it on a voted bond until then. See, this is what my beautiful printer looks like compared to their page.
It's telling
Something
you
with the
something,
pinks and
yeah.
the blues.
Okay, so we'll open up questions from the committee and then we'll open up questions from the public.
So obviously you're an expert, you do this, I think you said for the entire state of Michigan. What do you normally see? A community or villages, kind of like it's a very small village, just 1,100 people. What do you commonly see people do? Just continue to kick the can and make the minimum investment to get by, or?
We've seen actually a number of the smaller ones do a millage increase within their limitation and do that, but no, it's only putting a Band-Aid on it until they can get to a bond situation. Some of the larger communities like your Southfields have just, bit the bullet.
Did it.
And even that didn't take care of all their needs, that
But
was
that had to
just,
go to a vote. Right?
Yeah. But, they just, they had a millage, they didn't want to be over a certain millage and, 100 million is what they could get for that. And it doesn't go very far. We have that many roads, so. So I'd say all over the board. We're seeing more, I think you had one of your neighbors, didn't they do?
Franklin, yeah.
Yeah. So, people are just finally getting to the point where that, they're frustrated.
Yeah.
So something has to happen. You know, so it all depends on what you want to do and how quickly you want to do it with the roads, because do the pay as you go is gonna be a longer time period before you can get a meaningful difference on your roads.
But you don't see a lot of special assessments anymore.
No, it's probably easier to do it with a smaller entity. And I would say, and I don't know your village, you know, as well as you, but I would I mean, I should never, you never assume, but if you're touching enough other roads within the village, the voted bond is not a bad idea, because when you do it for a community that has a lot of roads that are great, then, you know, you have residents that are upset because they're paying for the roads that they don't even, you know, travel on. So it's about what your community looks like, and, you know, will everyone benefit from the road improvements, and then sort of balancing that out.
Yeah, I think that's some of the dynamics this village deals with.
And some of them are looking at a combination of all, you know, maybe, you know, we have one small city that's saying, okay, I think we need to do this, you know, subdivision as a special assessment, because they're the only people that drive in their roads. You know, it doesn't, you know, you're only going in that if you live in there. It's not, there's no throughway. So, you know, they're doing a little bit of that, but it's, you know, even they're frustrated. It's been taking a very long time for communities to come up with a solution.
I think we're doing that with the private roads, you know, instead of having a special assessment, they just pay for everything in their little private subdivision. So
Right.
different way of handling it.
And I should say, if a private, because we have some, we're doing more roads than we have in a long time. But if you were, those private wanted to do it, they would have to be done at taxable interest rates, because they're private roads.
Any more questions? Yeah.
Hi, I have a question, and that is there a way for the village to address the risk of incurring an even higher interest rate when it goes to refund a bond? Because typically, I know we had a decade when interest rates were very low, but if you look historically, going back to say 1960, typically the rate on municipal bonds is greater than 5%.
I was lucky enough to start in the industry in the early 80s. And interest rates were like double digits, so I get it. So when the bonds are issued, typically most Michigan entities issue bonds at fixed rates. So you are fixing in that interest rate at the time you issue the bonds. It's common for bonds to have a call protection of 10 years, so that if you were to issue 20-year bonds and rates dropped, you can refinance them at lower rates and then, you know, pass the savings on to the taxpayers or to the village, depending on whether it's voted or non-voted. But you're right, there's a risk that rates, you know, will go up before the issuance, but you know, you would know that before you issued the bonds. The village would know that before issuing.
So then in the examples you gave us, though, the bond rate would be fixed over the 20-year term. It wouldn't, even if interest rates went up,
Right.
the rate would stay the same, right?
Yeah, we don't have a lot of people here or entities here in Michigan that want to assume interest rate risk. So.
Okay, we got another question?
Yeah, I was curious. So we take out a 20-year bond, a 15 million. What's the annual payback amount?
It depends, it's,
I'm not sure I'm reading this correctly.
so the 20-year, let me just throw, like, so 20 years at the $12 million issue, That's $900,000 a year on average for the bond payments.
But we can't do that. We don't have 900,000 a year.
Okay, don't assume,
So,
don't assume.
yeah, well, let's just say we currently don't have 900,000 a year to pay back. So what are the options then? What happens?
That particular option I just gave you was the option if the village were to decide to vote on a $12 million bond to be issued over a 20-year period. And then the residents would have to pay a 3.4 mil, increase on your taxes to pay for that.
So that includes, that's a requirement.
It is, the village has the right after the vote, well, the voters have to prove it first. Then the village has the right, and most would do it, to levy what's needed to pay the debt service on the bonds. Now, if the village decided it could, it could kick in $100,000 and lower the millage if the village had it to do. Like if there was extra 100,000, you can do that. But
It's not the interest rate.
when you set that ballot language, typically the bond attorneys are gonna want you to set it at what the estimate is to pay that bond back, because one village council can't commit the future village council. So
So if we don't pay it back, we simply get another bond to cover the cost.
no, you wouldn't
How
even
do you-
issue the bonds unless there was a vote of the people and the people approved it. Then you would have a millage on your tax bill, and that revenue would go to pay the debt service. The bonds would never be issued.
It's dedicated to that fund.
Yeah,
The money, the millage is dedicated to paying that,
So
that portion of it.
And only that, you can't
Right.
use it for anything other
Right.
than the bond payments.
can I clarify, because maybe I misunderstood you earlier? The council can't just increase it, for, let's say, a 20-year bond for one, at 6 million for 1.94 mils. The bond agency wants to see the voters approve it.
The village has the capacity within your current limitation to levy up to like 3 mils. So you could do that.
So the bond,
Excellent.
the bond company doesn't need to see a vote.
No,
But
I
then-
mean, it's just about where you want to get your revenue to pay your debt service payments. Do you want it as a part of the village's operational dollars so that, you're sort of limiting the village's future flexibility on, what happens if police costs or whatever costs go up or something increases?
So what
And-
you're
and
saying
it's-
is, I'm sorry, maybe that's where I missed your point. So if you add this as a voter road improvement millage increase, it can only be used for that because it's voted just for that purpose.
Right.
And then the council has no discretion.
It's only, so you have, as I see it, you have 3 options as it relates to millage. You have the voted debt, in that option, you're voting the amount of the bond, so let's call it $12 million. And then you levy whatever you need to pay the debt service on the bonds.
I'm sure that doesn't happen very often, does it?
Happens all the time.
Really?
Almost every school.
Voters
in
will
the
just
state.
approve $100 million bond without knowing how it affects them.
Look at your schools. I mean, that's how they do it.
Most
Um,
every millage increase, every time we've had an increase, we've voted on, I mean, from all the places I've looked, we've always voted on.
It says the millage in it, and that ballot will have the millage in it.
Oh,
So,
I thought you said that the ballot just says $100 million bond, we're gonna issue it, we don't know what the
no,
millage is.
so I don't think it'd be 100 million for you, but
I'm just saying
$12 million. The estimated first year millage, which is anticipated to be needed, is 3.48 mils, and the simple average annual millage over the life of the bond term is estimated at 3.41. It will say estimated.
Yeah.
because.
Based on 33322.
Yeah.
All that language would be yes or no in a box on your ballot.
Yeah, so that would be the language, there'd be a box yes, box no.
Mhm.
So that's option one. Option two is you could potentially, subject to your village attorney reviewing it and making sure you have capacity within your charter to do it. You could vote in a dedicated millage for roads. And then you could use that
Permanent
road.
village, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know, he or she would have to say whether you could do permanent millage or if it's a
So
time. yeah.
fixed one village. Or something.
And then-
It would be like 1 mil over 12 years or.
Mhm. You could say, whatever, it could be, if you can do the unlimited, or 20 years or 10 years or whatever you want. And under that option, you have the choice to just pay as you go as that money comes in. Or you can, at any point during that time period, decide, we need more now, so I'm gonna, like, sort of pledge that revenue source and issue a bond and use that money to pay back the debt service payments, and that's really what the bottom scenarios are here. And then, well, it's really that plus the last option. The last option is just using what you have available right now in your charter limitation of your operating. And just say that's for roads. That doesn't take a vote of the public because it's within the current limitation.
But the council, can they do that? How would they do that if the council said we're just, unless they were gonna take 1.5 mil for roads? Is it? the
They would have
council
to prove it.
Wrote in the bylaws that this millage is only to be paid for.
I don't think they
roads.
can, I don't know, they would.
So it
would
always
be
has
a-
to go in like a general fund and then they just extract other
Yeah.
general fund.
So a lot of cities have, they actually break out, even though it's all under their operating millage, it
Yeah.
might show, oh, this is for public safety, this is for, and I'm not talking about the ones that vote in millage for that, because that is separate line item, but sometimes, even though it's for their operating millage, they still put on their tax rate form, roads, public safety, whatever, but it all has to total up and be within that maximum that the village is allowed to levy, which, last year was 12.0727. And then, every year as you go on, it, to the extent that the rate, the tax base grows greater than the rate of inflation, that millage rate gets rolled back to a lower number. So, maybe it ends up somewhere down the line being, 10 mils.
You still got questions over there?
Yeah, I just was curious, is from your computation, what is the cost of the bond? Say we request a 12 million bond, $12 million bond, what is that gonna cost? And then what are the funds we would actually get for the roads?
So that's in the presentation. So the 12 million gets you, I think it was 15 million. Well, 12 million, 15 million of that is the funds on hand.
Page 5.
Yeah, page 5 goes through the cost on the presentation there. But I think you're probably talking about more than just the cost issuance. You're probably talking also about the interest costs over the life of the issue. So
No, I'm talking about how much of the
Day one. how much
day
would-
one,
Yeah.
how much do we get put in our bank account and how much do we pay you to write the bond?
our fee is probably,
You have it on the third page. the fee, but-
well, I don't have our fee there. That's not our fee. I wish that was our fee. No. That is a bunch of fees.
Yeah, but that's the total cost.
It's a total cost
For issuing.
issuing our fee is.
That's not her money.
It's tiny
Well, part of
little
it is-
fraction.
331,000.
Yeah, our fee's like probably 20-something thousand of that number, so. But the total cost of issuance, again, that includes something for the underwriters discount, so that the cost for the underwriter to sell the bonds to the investors, individual investors, and that's the biggest piece by far of that number.
So that's JP Morgan Chase.
Yeah.
and everyone, right?
Yeah.
Or me.
Yeah, that also has bond insurance in there, which you may not need. It just, we're not there and digging into credit stuff. This is so preliminary. It, includes bond attorney, because you have to have a tax, opinion that's delivered. The rating, the bonds have to be rated. It's the rating fee. It's the treasury filing fees. It's, financial advisor fee. It's there's an offering document that has to be prepared and published, by SEC requirements. So it's all of that is all included in for the 331,000, and that's 2 series of bonds. So that's sort of divided by half. So it's that much for each, the 2.
Hi, I have a question. I'm looking at page 7 and total debt payments, that column. Now, if I'm interpreting this correctly, this is the interest payments.
Principal and interest.
Oh, principal and interest.
Right. So you would deduct the 12 million?
No,
190 from
well, I'm
that?
looking at,
You're right.
just take the top row for example.
So you would deduct 6 million from the 7,362,000, and that's what's assumed in there for interest cost over the 10 years.
You're paying principal and interest every month
Right.
or every year, however you want to look at it.
A quick follow-up on the issuance costs, because I know it's been discussed, and I think Bill was maybe asking you when you guys were in communications ahead of time. Do those fees get paid out of the general fund, or do they get rolled into the bond?
Typically, they're
issued.
rolled into the bond.
Is there collateral on the bond?
So, no, I mean, I think you're asking like flat, so.
Like if we default, what do you take from the village?
Well, I wouldn't be the bondholder, but they can come after the village for, like the general funds they can make, it depends what type of bond is
Mhm.
issued. But again, we also included bond insurance. So the bond insurance company would be the first place that the bondholders would go after.
Okay.
Then the bond insurance company would sue you. So,
Just one more step.
yeah,
Yeah, I have a question. When the bond, at the end of the term of the bond, is the principal paid off? So it's-
yeah. So it's paid off over time. So you're not like waiting till the end. You're paying some down each year because, otherwise it costs you more in interest. Legally, we can't even structure it like that in Michigan. You're required to start paying principal off in, sort of some of the earlier years. And
Okay, so you're paying, it's almost like a mortgage then.
so it goes up each year. So when we're structuring it, we're trying to structure it for this, we do it differently depending on what the purpose is. But we're trying to structure it for the lowest millage rate so that the current taxpayer isn't just hit with a really high bill. Because if we were to, let's say, do 1/10 of the principal from day one, your millage rate is gonna be high
Mhm.
in the first year. So, we still need to make sure we're paying pursuant to federal,
So
state
you
law.
have some kind of formula technique to balance or even it out over the term.
Right. Yeah. And there's just legal restrictions that we're not allowed to sort of loom that at the end.
Have you ever dealt with a community that had slightly more than 50% of its people on private roads?
Not that I know of, but normally that's more of an engineering, that thing than, but I'd say probably not.
Yeah, that's our situation.
Mhm.
Unique.
Right, I would,
Right.
yes, yes, I would agree.
Any other questions? Good job.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm sure that Bill will give you a call.
And I definitely want to, like, let's circle back up to Mr. Burley's question about the taxable value to make sure that it aligns,
Right.
because I'm with him. It seemed a little disconnected to me. So,
Okay, speaking of Mr. Burley.
You don't have to stay the whole time, by the way.
yeah, I'm
You're-
gonna
Okay,
head out.
all right.
She's trying to be secretive about it.
So, I'm up.
You're up.
Okay. So everybody is,
I'm sorry, Jim.
no problem.
Kathy is not here out of concern for her
You want
husband,
to hand it
right?
out?
So there's, I have to pass these out, we'll be done in a minute. So there are, her presentations are here, or her pages are here in the packet. And she dropped off wearing a mask and passing through the door, just some notes that I would pass out to all of you. So just take a page, if you would, and pass it down.
These are sterile.
I believe so. They were in a sealed envelope. And she said, there's no need to discuss, just here they are for everyone's digestion in between meetings, and she didn't even think that she needed to present this even at the next meeting, for example. So I just wanted to go through that, get that out to everybody. And then Jim, whenever you're prepared, go ahead and start with your stuff.
Sure. Want to spend time on Kathy's here or just digest it?
I think you should just digest it.
Digest,
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody has received via Ken, I believe, a copy of the proposal I wrote up. So I don't know if everybody has read it or not, and I can take the approach and based on feedback I'm getting here, of just reading through it, answering questions as I go through it. Or I can just take questions, or let's see, one.
Whatever you want to do is fine with me.
Okay. So I put this together on the basis of Kurt, you had presented, some of the options we all had in our minds to consider, which is, status quo, do the maintenance program and spend the 9 million. And so I thought about that, and this is a version of spending the 9 million at a reduced cost, because as I looked at the 9 million, I felt that it didn't make sense to me, just based on what I would consider a return on investment. So I decided to write this up, not as the single proposal, but as one of the proposals. So as we saw, HRC's proposal is a mix of selective short and long-term rehabilitations. They have emphasized the total will depend upon the village's goal to their for their public roads, and i.e. Paisley rating, something we had discussed with them. At the end of the day, they said it's up to us what we want and our objective, and now we've gotten feedback that the council wants like a 5 to 6 Paisley rating road.
Is that gonna affect your presentation very much?
No, I mean, I kind of targeted this for probably 6 to 7. I think I might even said that in here,
Okay.
but it's pretty close. I figured we're not gonna want to be at the high end, we're not gonna be wanting to be a low end, we'll be somewhere in between. So we kind of aligned with what I had made in this proposal. The selective rehabilitation presented by HRC is primarily resurfacing, capping with some drainage improvements for most of the roads in the village. For the roads, Bristol Lane, I say it's Court, this is Sager, Bristol, and Brittner Court have been designated the longer term rehabilitation. And in effect, that's a complete asphalt removal, replacement with major drainage upgrades. The cost of the longer term rehabilitation is, of the 9 million, is 4.37 million, which is almost half of the total recommendation of 9 million. So this equates to twice the cost of resurfacing as calculated by Bingham Road, or $320 per lineal foot of road versus Bristol Lane and the courts at $644 per lineal foot. for the complete asphalt replacement, all the drainage improvements. Based on the information we're given, both Bingham Road and Bristol Lane were initially paved in 1984 and then resurfaced in 2003 and 5 respectively. Both roads seem to have an effective lifespan of about 20 years, plus or minus a couple of years, between rehabilitations without regular preventative maintenance. I mean, there's been maintenance done on them, but it's not an annual maintenance. I would say that's a little bit of reactive maintenance. If we complete the longer term rehabilitation on Bristol Lane and courts, will it last 40 years for twice the money? My supposition, based on everything I heard from HRC and everything, all the research I've done, is no asphalt road lasts 40 years.
I think that's accurate.
Even the bond lady said that.
Sure.
In Michigan,
As expected, when we're spending twice as much. The answer, however, as I stated, HRC could not guarantee that. Even if this long-term proposal lasted 30 years, if we could somehow boost up our roads to last another 50% longer, 30 years, the village would need at least 2 cycles of rehabilitation to cover the initial investment. And the actual payback, if you do it in today's dollars, is 60 years. I put 55 because of inflation, but that's an estimate. It's not a direct calculation. I didn't use any numbers like she said in the 333,222 on. So that doesn't seem like to me, a good return on investment. Based on the history of Bristol, the history of Bingham Farms and how much we'd be spending. So I have a revised proposal based on that assumption not being a good investment, is just to resurface Bristol Lane and the courts, Sager, Bristol, and Brittner, which is the same rehabilitation as proposed for Bingham Road. If we adopt that Bingham Road as the surrogate, the cost of the resurfacing and drainage improvements, because there are drainage improvements in Bingham Road as well, are listed here. I won't go through them. But I did take off 100 feet because I live at the end of Bristol Lane, and there's a turnaround there. It was done about 10 years ago, 10 or 11 years ago, and it's in good shape. They put all new drains in, curbs and everything, and I don't think that needs to be rehabilitated. So I extracted off that 100 feet.
That's my turnaround.
That was your turnaround.
Mhm.
Good job. So this brings the total down to about 2.2 million, or about roughly $2 million savings on that portion of the rehabilitation. With the HRC recommendation of yearly preventative maintenance, based on MDOT's guidance, we can extend this life of road, I believe, beyond 20 years. Because if we're doing intermittent maintenance now, and we do a regular maintenance plan, maybe we can get another 2, 3, 5 years out of the road. I don't know exactly. Everything seems to be a little bit nebulous, but they say if you spend 150,000 on these 5.2 miles of roads, you can maintain or greatly reduce the slope of degradation on the roads. So I would figure we could get another, let's say 2.5 to 5 years out of the roads. So instead of doing it every 20 years, you do it every 25 years. Additional savings can come by from eliminating selective rehabilitation of Brooks Lane. When I looked at the Paisley rating on the map here that was given to us in the booklet, they're already at an 8. So really don't think that we should do any rehabilitation on that road since it's already an 8. We can just do the normal maintenance as part of the maintenance plan, 150,000 to maintain that rating. So that's $113,000 savings. And then in the last meeting, we talked about Timber Trail and converting it to a walking path, and Ken had done the investigation, found that there's possibilities that we could maybe get a 50% matching grant, which would bring down from the $9 million for Timber Trail down to, I think, 162,000, what we're saying now.
Can I just stop for a second? Sure. Ken, have you done any more, do you have anything to add about that possible matching grant for
9 million,
No, so
you said? You didn't mean
I
that?
said of the 9 million
Oh, I see.
rehabilitation
Okay.
plan, I refer to the selective rehabilitation as the $9 million plan, so I'm using those terms
All right,
interchangeably, but in the $9 million plan for Timber Trail, we have $596,900. And if we just convert it to a paved
Walking that.
walking path, can we agree that maybe potentially we get 50% of that, which would be, would bring the total cost down to 162,000. I think that's what we calculated, 162 and some change, 162,400.
Pretty good.
I'm just asking if Ken is on board with the part about, do you think it's possible we could get the matching grant?
yeah,
For-
I've actually investigated a couple of those things, and I mean, of course, you can't apply for it now, we're not there yet. But
Right.
there's what's called a Transportation Alternatives Program, which is a grant through MDOT, Michigan Department of Transportation, that I think this would be a good candidate for. I would say, though, if this were done, and I don't want to take away from too much from what you're on a roll, and I don't want to stop you. But my vision of this is that Timber Trail alone doesn't connect much to anything except another road. The Bingham Road proposal includes the Sherrill thing along the side. That connects to 14 to 13 mile. So as looking at this as a package network, I think that would make more sense to the grant funders, or the grant awarders, than just simply the road itself. So I would package Timber Trail with the Bingham Road portion of this, which means it might not be for a few years, right? And the cost might change a little. That's how I would look
But
at it.
basically, you're sort of agreeing with him that we could possibly get a grant that would cut the cost of this.
Yeah, we talked back and forth. I
Okay,
emailed
all right,
about that
sorry,
whole
I didn't realize
concept.
that. Okay, sorry.
And the only other thing I would point out is when I look at this, at the numbers, I look at the 325,400 on the front page of the HRC estimate for road length, cost of Timber Trail alternative is a path rather than a larger number, That's all.
In the 9 million, it's 5, so the 9 million, that includes the 596,900. They didn't state that is not part of the $9 million plan. That's why I call it the $9 million plan, Ken. It's the $9 million plan includes 596,000, not the 325. So the savings to the 9 million, I'm trying to reference everything to the $9 million plan. And the savings to the $9 million plan have been 434,000. That's where I got that. number. That makes
okay.
sense.
Well, they have letter designations like the A plan or the B plan.
Yeah.
Whenever you say 9 million, I see everybody's going.
Well, it is confusing because they give you, different options here, but I'm just referring to the $9 million plan, which is, I'm rounding $8,996,000 up to $9 million. So that puts the selective rehabilitation cost to roughly 6.3 million. I think on the next page, we had, as we were questioning HRC, they had a very large engineering number in there of 25%. And even they admitted that this is an overestimation. They were very conservative because they hadn't done any coding work. And typically an engineering fee for the road plans like this are 10%. So the total engineering cost should be closer to 10%. And I agree with that based on my background and all the work I've done in engineering and large projects, that 8 to 9% for engineering costs is about right. I think that they overestimated that, and I think they were just being conservative. So I think that is a good cost avoidance of $1,000. And with that opportunity, I would bring the cost estimate for the selective rehabilitation down to 5.339 million. Now, of course, these are all cost estimates. There are no statements out there yet because no statements of work have been written, so nothing can be quoted. So again, this is all based on their estimates. So from that, the work plan, I decided to put some more granularity to what that means. If we bring the cost down to 5.339 million in terms of schedule for actually doing the work, as well as what it would take to pay for it and the repayment of that plan. So the starting point I have in the work plan is the 2.7 million that we talked to the treasurer about. Kurt, you said is $2.7 million is in the general fund for roads. That's what you said on the last meeting.
That's what the treasurer has said, and it comes from the roads and the specific road
Yeah.
funds. I don't remember.
And
what
she
they're
had
called.
3 million here,
Yeah, she was off.
but it's close.
Close enough,
Yeah.
yeah,
All these numbers are directional.
right.
This is giving you a sense of what it would take to do something. There's gonna be pluses and minuses, and everything I've done here is based in today's dollars. I didn't bake in, inflation and everything. I felt I would just be conservative and just do it in today's dollars, because you're gonna increase revenue over time in the village because of tax assessment. So I modeled a 1 and a 2 mil increase for the road improvement over a fixed time frame. We talked about the Act 51 money yearly surplus is averaging about $60,000. Again, in today's funding, one of the things Jason had brought up in his presentation on funding was the Michigan State Infrastructure Bank that loans money for these types of activities for road improvements. And so their current interest rate is at 3.25%, and they will provide loans up to communities in Michigan of $2 million. So with that, with a 1 mil increase, and I have the tables to back this up, we could take a 9-year SIB loan of 1.675 million to pay for that selective rehabilitation over a 4-year schedule, as I'm going to cover shortly, or a 3-year SIB loan of 865,000 with a 2 mil increase. And if there's any other sources of revenue, philanthropic donations or grants or whatever, it could be reduced further. But these are the assumptions of this proposal. So I took some feedback from HRC and bundling the projects and lake projects, and they said that we had to spend at least $200,000 in order to get they would call mobilization of people and efficient spending of money. So all of this, so what I did is create a schedule over 4 years, a little bit arbitrary, but I thought based on amount funding and not having the whole village torn up for 1 year, if we partition it up in kind of 25% segments over 4 years, then the first year in 2025, I assume would be 2025, because all the work has to be done prior to actually awarding the contracts. And by the time we get an engineering study done and pay for it and scope of work written and bids back, it'll be 2025, believe me. So in 2025, I proposed roughly 1.3 million spending for Bristol Court, Brigham Court, Sager Court, and Bingham Lane. They're all would have the same type of work done. And the next year, about 1.3 again for Bristol Lane and Hickory Hollow. And then in 2027 would be Bingham Road. It's the biggest, now would be the biggest expenditure because it's the longest road. It's a 1 mile road of 1.44 million. And then in 2028, we would end up spending 1.348 million for Shagwood, Old Orchard, Coach Lake, Old Stage, From, and Timber Trail. So again, as I pointed out earlier, if we do adopt I really truly believe that we should adopt the yearly preventative maintenance plan to boost the length of our roads longer than the 20 years that we're seeing right now. And I think we could maintain, I think I did put in here 5 to 8 based on my analysis, we could maintain like a 5 to 8 Pazer range for an extended period.
So the road improvement for Bingham Road, that's a major road account. I think you're getting money out of different designated funds.
Well, we would have to take a loan, as I had pointed out. So if you go to, let's just try looking at the first one, which is a 1 mil increase. If you go to table on page 4, table 2, please. So we start out with, and I'm not a finance guy, so.
No, you're doing great.
excuse me. I'm an engineer, so we start out with the 2.7 million in the general fund, and we have a 1 mil increase. According to what the treasurer says, that would generate $195,000 in additional revenue every year. And I'm taking into consideration the $60,000 Act 51 surplus. And then if you look over the expenditure, which is the 4 expenditures of the 2025 through the 2028 year. Those are the expenditures, and the revenue is on the left-hand side here. So you can see the balance. The general fund would go down the first year because of, spending $1.3 million, but having some money coming in. The next year, it goes down to $660,000 for 2026, and then in the third year, the road maintenance is when we would have to get the loan. So we would have to get the loan from the state of Michigan because we wouldn't have enough money to pay for year 4. And I've calculated, and in today's dollars, of course, I think this could be better modeled, but a $1.675 million loan at 3.25% interest. And then you can see that in 2028, our general fund goes down quite a bit. Some is down to 0.
Don't like that.
Yeah, but I modeled it just to see what it would look like, right? You can always borrow a little bit more money and boost it up, or defer the spending over 5 years versus 4.
Just with regard to that point too, it's the general fund of the 2.7 million set aside for the roads.
General
is down
fund for
to
the roads, yeah. the general
2.9.
fund.
There's still like $1.5 million or something like that.
Yeah,
Not going towards
That
Correct,
that.
yeah,
means
that's what I was about to ask.
the road
Clarify.
general fund.
Yeah.
Just put it as a
It's
road
on it,
general fund.
yeah.
Right, so it wouldn't be like we were just having $2,942 that we'd have.
Just in the road.
Just roads, right.
That's out of the 2.7 we started with that could be spent on the roads right now.
Right.
And you can see the interest payments are gonna be $54,000 a year. On that loan at 3.25%. I'm just assuming we pay it back at the very end. So this doesn't consider, this doesn't consider like you're gonna earn interest on the money you have in the general fund and everything, because eventually you're gonna need, to pay back that $1.675 million loan. So you can see here, we could, with this plan, 1 mil increase, over 9 years, did I say? How many years did I say? Loan over 9 years, but the village increase has to be over 11 years. You could pay for the selective rehabilitation. And I did the same thing on the next page, which is with the 2 mil increase. It just shows that obviously you can pay back that loan much quicker, and you can have the millage over a shorter period of time, which would be 6 years, and then you'd have everything paid back. Hopefully, if we did a plan like this, and we did the preventative maintenance, maybe we have 25-year roads, and we have time to plan for the next one. And you don't have to do the bond. Yeah.
Does anybody know what it takes to get an SIB loan? We've never done it before, right?
No, we haven't.
Well, I have a question, which is, Now, your plan for Bristol Lane sounds reasonable, and were you able to get any feedback from HRC on that, on a resurfacing approach as opposed to total reconstruction?
I think I took the cue from them when they were here. We grilled them for a good hour and a half or more. That they said it was really up to us what we wanted to do. And my assessment of doing the major part, what you're spending the other twice the money on is the drainage. And I don't disagree that putting that drainage in is good. It's just a bad investment. I mean, if I had my druthers and money wasn't an issue, I'd say go put the drains in. But it's just too much money to put the drains in for a return on investment, because it's not gonna extend the road life that long. It's good practice. If you're building a brand new road, you do that. You put all that drainage in. But if you have an old factory, you only do so much to renovate an old factory, right? You don't build a brand new factory.
But the HRC theory is that if the drain doesn't drain water, the water gets under the road and cracks it, right?
But we
and that-
already have history that the roads last 20 years.
Right.
So history is a better predictor than their estimation, in my opinion, based on my experience. So we already know the roads last about 20 years, whether it's Bingham Road or Bristol Lane, the last 20 years. There still are drainage improvements in the rehabilitation plan, the selective rehabilitation plan. There's still clean outs of the ditches and making sure, there's already some drainage improvements in the base plan, even in this plan that I proposed. It's just not the extensive drainage improvements that they had recommended.
Makes sense.
So if I could make a couple of comments. So first, I think that this, in my mind, is something that the format and the way it's presented is something that the council is looking for.
Right.
The original request was 3 to 5 proposals, and now we actually see a proposal, so I like that.
Mhm.
And I think the logic is good. So I think this is, I'm not on the council. I can't speak for you guys, but this is what I consider a proposal. Now, the question I have too, though, just to keep following up on this, I mean, the Bristol Lane and the courts, you're right, the way they proposed it is a very significant amount of money. But they have also said that they would not recommend doing a selective rehabilitation on those roads. And they said it because they said the soil samples they took had a lot of clay, that the drainage was never really put in properly. So they had a lot of reasons that they said they wouldn't even recommend a selective rehabilitation. As a matter of fact, they went as far to say as it would be a poor choice. Now, when we use Bingham Road as a surrogate, again, it's just saying per foot it should cost this because that's what Bingham Road's going to cost. The core samples from Bingham Road very clearly were superior to Bristol Lane. And as a matter of fact, they made the direct comment that said they would not even recommend doing a complete reconstruction of Bingham Road because the soil and the subsurface was so good. So that's my curious question is, maybe you're right. Maybe the return doesn't make sense. They did last 20 years. I think when was that road last paved?
2005.
So 20 years. But it does somehow contradict the engineering study. So it's just at least something to consider.
Yeah, I did consider it. And when they were in here and talking about their core samples. The first time I saw the report, because I went to a council meeting previously, and then they talked about it again when they were here about the core samples and the core subsoils. And then when I read through their actual plan, they have no plan to change the subsoil on Bristol
drainage,
Lane.
yeah.
Just drainage.
Just
They were
drainage.
just gonna do drainage, and they said, we have a really good cap of gravel over the road. And so they absolutely do not recommend disturbing that cap. And what they did say was, maybe in some areas, we would test if the road is squishy here or there. And I said, well, what's the test for that? How would you test if a road is squishy and you need to go and replace the subsoils? But we take the asphalt off and then we would drive a heavy truck over it and see if it bounces or it comes down. And so basically you're saying is the only way you can test the subsoils is if you take the road out, the road cap. So I defer back to how long did the road last in the first place? Because that's reality. What they're saying is a proposal. Now, I don't disagree that it's the right thing to do if you're building a new road. It just is a very bad investment. It's too much money. It's, there's a lot of things we want to have in life but they're too much money, it's not affordable. There's no return on investment, right? So it's not that I'm saying that they're wrong to put drainage in. I'm just saying it's not a good investment. And that's our
It's just-
obligation.
It's just, again, I'm not on the council. If I was on the council, I would want HRC in here to say, is this a good idea or not?
Well, didn't they do core samples?
Yeah, they did.
They did core samples, but then in the last meeting, I said, so the core samples we shouldn't even look at core samples anymore because we're not gonna disturb the gravel cap. He said, that's right. Forget about the core samples.
Oh, I missed that.
I didn't miss it.
Clearly.
First of all, I can't talk for the entire council, but I can talk for one member
Yeah,
of the
there you
council.
go.
And this is exactly the kind of thing that I would want to see. And so, thank you for doing the work and putting it together. I think I understand you to say that this plan would include the council spending out of its general budget $150,000 for the maintenance plan. And
Yeah, that was in my, conclusion is that this should include the maintenance to extend the life of the road.
Okay, so the $150,000 that we're currently setting aside for the roads, we could just use that to fund the.
The maintenance, and
The
that's not
maintenance.
in the funding plan.
Got it.
That is not in the funding plan. I didn't put that in here.
Got it.
So
Got it.
I would consider that, and I would consider, I'm not a civil engineer, I'm an electrical and mechanical engineer. But I would think that a civil engineer, you'd want to have, it's just a recommendation, and I put it in here, that you'd want to have a civil engineer go and review the roads in the late spring, after the winter, and all the damage is done by the freeze-thaw cycle to put together kind of a rehabilitation or preventative maintenance plan. Have that all done during the summer, and then, late summer, maybe early fall, have them come in and just do one more visual analysis of the road to see if there's anything that needs to be touched up, any cracks that came up, and then be ready for winter. But I would think that's what the preventative maintenance plan would be. That maybe it's HRC or some other engineering company, but they would come in and do a visual inspection, put together a list for road company to come and do work, whether it's crack sealing, capping, pothole filling or what have you,
Right.
drainage improvements, if there's drains stuck or culverts that are blocked or, anything that would prevent the roads from operating as they're currently designed.
Right. I thought that's what it was. I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding you right. Then the second question I have is, how does, I'm stuck on how the loan gets repaid. Is,
It would just be the term of the loan, you prepay the balance at the end of the term. That's how I structured it.
right, but how are we prepaying that?
Because
From the
you're
millage.
accumulating millage from 2028, all the way down to 2036. Because you're spending all the entire loan in that 1 year when you're issuing it.
Okay, so
Which is what you want to do.
So we get the loan in 2027, and then we're saving all this 195
Plus the 60,000.
yeah, plus the 60,000. But I guess what's confusing me then is the general fund.
Is building up from that accumulation.
Yeah, but it's
Or
not. It's
being
going
taken
down.
because of the
It
expenditures.
gets taken down in the first
Because you're spending
4
money on
years,
it.
and then it gets built up.
Oh, wait a minute. I see. It was at 1,409,000, and then it went up by 195 plus the 60, and then that,
Down by-
though, that then paid off the, okay, got it. And you said you didn't put the 4% increase in
I
cost
did
of the
everything in
roads?
today's dollars. I could, Mason, if you want me, I could put it all in
Well, but I mean, like,
future dollars. We could put in that present.
but you had a
value.
reason for it, though. The
I just
reason,
wanted to make it really simple.
okay,
I wanted to show a very simple analysis without convoluting it with, interest rate increases, CPI and everything. I just wanted to show, this is a proposal. It needs to be obviously massaged for what the actual plan would be for financial guidelines of assessment
See, if
increases.
he's breaking it down year by year, the 4% gets broken down year by year. I mean, it's not the full 4% for the total project.
And the amount unspent.
right,
Yeah.
right, that's true too. So it's not 4% of $6 million or whatever it is, because it comes down, but more as we do a road, yeah. Yeah, and, but I think was there a comment in there that revenues would go up as well, or?
Revenues will go up by whatever the assessment goes up, just like you could adopt, what she did was better, obviously, because she put in the revenue increases. She predicted 333, 222 from there on out. And, there's gonna be some increases in potentially costs, maybe it's decreases, you don't know. It all depends upon, how busy road construction companies are over the next 4 years. It's hard, as an economist, does the economy cool off, and does the federal government stop spending so much on roads, and then there's more supply and road construction crews? It's hard to predict that, right?
Right, but what you're saying, though, and I think I agree with you, is that even though the cost is going up 4% each year,
Your revenue.
some of the revenues are going up.
She's assuming your revenue is going up 3%, 3%, 3%, and then 2%, 2%, 2% from there on out. So you could model that in here too. So
And
your
you-
revenue is not
yeah.
gonna be 195,000 per year. Yeah, I just put it in everything in today's
Right.
dollars.
Right, I got it, okay. And then I would agree that, and this is up to you, because I think this is a good proposal, and I think it should be one of the 5, basically, but I wonder whether you think it's worth getting HRC back to specifically talk about the one issue that you mentioned before we submit this to the council. In other words, I would hate to submit it to the council, because if I'm on the council, I'm gonna ask the same question he's asking. And if we go to the council meeting and we call HRC back, and HRC says, this
Well,
totally
I-
won't,
I would propose that maybe just 2 or 3 of us meet with the HRC in a smaller audience.
okay,
Because my opinion is that it would probably be a more constructive dialogue in a smaller meeting than a big meeting like this. If that's okay.
yeah, however we can do it, it's fine with me.
Yeah.
You might wanna do
Eric,
that,
if you
then.
wanna be in.
Sure, yeah.
Sure.
We could, I don't know if we can set that up, Ken.
It's possible. I need, how many people are you talking about? 3?
4,
Can't be 4.
Not 4 of
3.
us.
Has to be 3.
3, okay, 3
I
people.
need 3 schedules, plus mine, plus Brad's. So, that's kind of tricky sometimes, but see if we can work it out.
Now, Kurt, when the council says they want 3 to 5, they will accept 3, obviously. Do they want them all together, or can we submit this one as the first one of the 3 and come and the Hagemans as the second one? Stagger them out.
We haven't, there has been no discussion about like
You
taking.
can
a
put
piece
them
of-
all in this format.
Right, I mean,
Make
but
it easier, right?
I think. I don't, well. I don't want to speak like for all 7 council members when I'm just one person, but I was planning on. Looking at them all together at one time, but that doesn't mean that, this could be a done proposal. Once we talk to HRC, and we could just say, put it in the can, say, here, we got 1, and let's move on and get 2 and 3,
Yeah,
Right,
that's
I
what I'm
think
thinking.
we talked about 1 being just
Status quo.
Just doing what you're doing today and no more. And then 2 being, do what you do today with the 150,000.
Correct.
Preventative maintenance.
Correct.
And then this could be 3.
This
And
could
then
be-
what else do you want to do?
A bond issue.
Well, you could do, I think there
I'm
are,
just trying to think out loud, because to me, this is the right discussion to be having right now, is who's gonna work on what? Meaning, who's gonna take charge of the do nothing scenario, to put it in this format, bring it back? Who's gonna be in charge of the spend $150,000? Because Jim took charge of this, he did it himself, I think.
Right.
And if we all leave and just say, I'm just gonna choose one, that may not be an efficient way to do it. That's all.
well, I have started working with,
Well, this could be one.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely.
I've started working with our treasurer on both the, status quo and the, $150,000 maintenance plan. One, and I'd hope to have it done for today, but, and it's not near as complete as yours, but.
But I'll send the Word document, this Word document,
That's
so you
good.
can.
Yeah.
I just kept it in PDF for now, and then I'll send you the.
Yeah,
Word
send me the
document.
Word one.
It's okay if you can do it in Word, don't do it.
Yeah, I'm sure they can all work in Word.
Okay.
So you won't have 3 if you flesh yours out, have the Hagemans and Jim's. We've got,
4, yeah.
I'm not sure about Hageman when yet, I hadn't looked at it yet, so.
okay. Well, it's worth the submission as a proposal.
Yeah, but it's gonna have to be put in some kind of presentable format.
The other one that I would suggest that we at least consider, and that is a proposal that has a component in it that's special assessment. And the reason I suggest that is because I'm still concerned about, passing whatever we have to do. And we've got this unique problem with 51% of the people on private roads. So that would be one that I think that we should consider doing. Not, I don't think the numbers will work for, a special assessment that, requires the people on the roads to pay 70% or anything like that, but some lower number. I would like to see a proposal that at least tries to do that.
Well, I agree, and maybe for it, and we mentioned this last time, because I think it's a two-sided issue. You're right, you got the people on the private roads, and they're already paying for their road repairs. And then you got the people that live on, like I do, on Bingham Lane, which have a massive frontage. And so it is a combination of the two, because if you just present it one way or the other way, it probably isn't going to get passed.
Right.
So to me, it's really, when we talk about, we really have to talk about both sides. Special assessment, I think it's a good idea to do the work to flush it out. And that may be what helps us get it passed. But what will happen in the end is 70 or 80% of the cost will go to the people that live on Bristol Lane and Bingham Lane and Bingham Road. Because that's where all the frontage is. As a matter of fact, there's no frontage in the, maybe that's part of the way we put it together.
So we should take that on.
Pardon?
Special assessment, is that something that's right in the forefront of your mind?
Would you be willing to talk about that for like just get together and get together and see if we could think
I really agree on the concept, as I listened to her, it reinforced some thoughts I'd already had, that might be a way of giving something to everybody. I favor the concept. I'll be really honest, this is not a strong suit for me. I can't develop these kinds of plans and run these numbers. It's not my
Right.
skill set.
Not mine either.
Well, then I don't know.
I'll do it.
Well, there's a formula that the state, that the county kind of adopts and recommends for special assessments, because the county does special assessments on roads all the time, all over the county. And they're usually going from gravel to paved. And they do have they do have a, like, sort of like a template that you could follow. That might help, or whoever's doing it, actually. I just have to find it again. I'm pretty sure I could in a day or two.
Well, are you good at charts and
I'm
stuff?
good
like that?
enough, yeah. I'm good enough for this.
Well, maybe you and I can.
I like that.
The other thing is, I want, keep this in mind, so Jim has table 2, which is a 1 mil increase. And table 3, which is a 2 mil increase, it's sort of 2 proposals. I mean, you could look at it that way, the only question is, then that begs another question. Is this is an alternative, and this is, are you going to present this to council? Remember, they're making the decision, right? It's not you guys. So is it a 1 mil increase that council imposes or just picks or votes on and it's enacted for fiscal year 24-25, which is coming up? Or is it a 1 mil increase that goes on the ballot? Or is it 2 mils imposed by council or a 2 mil ballot proposal on?
That's 4 proposals.
Well, yeah, that's the way to look at it.
So
That's-
I did
yeah.
2 mils here, just
Right.
for granularity, just to give you different. If you ask me, if I was to do this. And if I pick one, one proposal, I would do the 1 mil. And I wouldn't even propose the
council?
2 mil.
Okay.
Yeah.
By council.
I just put it in as an alternative financial, just
Okay.
shield the payback and.
I would tend to say that showing an option is important because it pushes them towards what the most obvious option would be. That'd be, if I were reviewing it, and I wouldn't review it as 2 different proposals, I would review it as the same proposal with 2 options. And then,
2 financing options.
yeah, and then the council can go, yeah, but thanks for presenting the second option, but this is ridiculous, we're not gonna do that. It's fine, and they go to the first option.
So if you just did the 1 mil increase, then again, it would be, is one alternative simply council voting to raise the millage 1 by 1, or is it council putting it to a ballot? That's a decision that they would have to
Right.
make, of course.
Right, and the disadvantage of just doing a 1% council, well, a couple of
Well, no.
disadvantages, it is, number one, you're making a decision about a fairly major project without giving the residents an opportunity to vote on it. And number two, if it's just the council, then, and it goes up 1 mil, the council's not really obligated then to spend it all on roads, right? I mean, that would be the intent, but if there's no legal requirement for the council,
You're kind of locking them in because when you take that loan, you have to pay it back.
well, that's true too.
So when you take that loan, you are gonna have to pay all that revenue. All that revenue is gonna have to pay back that loan. That locks them in.
That would be the restriction.
Can we approach SIB so that we can confirm process, terms, et cetera?
I have something here already. I didn't actually call them, but I did look at some stuff.
Do you have a contact, or would you like any?
I
it's-
called them.
You
It's
just,
right here on the,
I called their loan officer
okay, there you go.
and she's right on the website. I included the website right in here. But I would recommend the treasurer call her.
he's got documents, he's already looking into this.
Okay, good.
So you have to, they won't loan directly to a village or township, they have to go through the county, so you have to get the road commission to sponsor the loan. Basically, and then get the loan to the township, they call us a township because it's Southfield Township.
So we should try to maximize that. I mean, it's subsidized, it's below the rate of inflation.
Yeah,
You know,
it's 3.25% right now, and they go up prime.
Yeah.
They held it below prime right now.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, so we've got plenty of homework. Eric, you gonna take it on?
A curtain on it.
Okay. Thank you.
So, all right, let's let me get some names for exactly who's doing what, just to clarify. Special assessment option or alternative? Is the two of you.
Yeah. And either you or maybe, Bill.
Uh-huh. Okay. What's the other, is there another work group?
Yeah, we want to meet with HRC. Who else wants to meet with HRC to talk about that? So
I trust you, you're the vice chair.
I think a couple of us should. I mean, I
Do you
I
want,
don't wanna throw too much of my time in, but I'm, if it's one meeting somewhere, I'd be glad to sit down with
I
them.
think it would be a 45-minute, half hour to 45-minute meeting. So Eric and I and whoever else, Ken, yourself and HRC for 30 to 45-minute meeting.
How many, committee people did you have on that?
Two, Eric and Jim.
Okay. If you need a third, I'd be willing
I
to.
thought you were doing the
By
other
the way,
one.
I think it would be.
Plus
good
the
to
do
have-
nothing one.
I think it would be good to have a council member.
She's doing the do nothing one too?
Yeah, but the
Or
do
the-
nothing, the do
whatever.
nothing
Nothing
was
was easy.
pretty much gonna be-
Yeah. All right.
That one prefers do nothing.
So, Jim, for some of these numbers on the proposal, Bristol Lane, Bristol Court, Ritter and Sager. You went down their list and you removed just simply certain items that were drainage, is that correct?
No,
Okay. How did you get to those numbers then?
so what I did to get to those numbers, to get to the Bristol, to get to the new number for Bristol Lane and the courts, the 3 courts, they took Bingham Road and what they were doing and applied that to those roads. So, $320 a foot on Bingham Road. I applied that to Bristol Lane and Sager, Bristol Court and Ritter Court. So those were those numbers. So I didn't touch their, all the content.
Right.
So
Yeah, okay. I'm thinking some of the drainage stuff, like, if it's not part of it, would just not be part of the assessment or the estimate either. But we can, we'll deal with that one.
But I could, if you look at the Bingham, if you look at the contents of the Bingham Road, which would be number 2. So number 2, which is 1.694,
Yeah, I got
1.7
it.
million.
Yeah, look at that.
So all this content that they're doing
Mhm.
would apply to the Bristol Lane and the courts.
Mine with the,
So you see,
the square, the footage a little bit different.
yeah, obviously I scaled it to the
Right.
lineal feet
Yeah.
of that road versus the other
All
roads.
right,
And so things like ditch clean out, reestablishment, ditch
Mhm.
reestablishment, under drain subgrade, well, there's nothing there for that,
Yeah.
but
I see.
the
it.
items.
I know what
that-
you
yeah.
mean. Okay,
So all those items will be applied to,
okay. So when I call Brett, I want to be able to explain to him exactly the approach here.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I would do then, you two guys are gonna work on the specialist, you guys just get together
That's
or email each other, figure out your schedules. As far as the 3 of us in HRC, I will shoot you all an email and ask you for some dates. Let me see what Brett's situation is next week. And then we'll try to put something together. It could be during the day or no? Are there any restrictions?
If it's during the day, I'd prefer either early or late in the day, but.
All right, well, we'll deal with it. on
Where's their
email.
office? That's the first thing I said. Where's their office?
They would come here.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, they
Same
would
thing.
come here. I think it's in Bloomfield, but I'm not really positive. They would come here. I'll get it all that with an email. All right.
We could theoretically also do it by Zoom.
No, we could also do that. That might work.
Do what I'm talking-
Zoom, just
Do
have a
a meeting by
Zoom.
Zoom.
all the subgroups, you got all the status, you know,
There's just two subgroups, correct?
to do nothing.
Well, that's Kurt and
Okay.
Bill. I'm
You can
gonna
do
let them
it
deal
by
with that.
yourself.
Yeah.
He's doing with the treasurer, right?
Yes.
Yeah, when I say Bill Patton, I'll just let them handle that together.
So the one thing we still haven't decided, is there a group that's gonna put together a proposal for a bond?
I think we might move that up to the council. I mean, that's not necessarily a road thing, it's how to fund anything. Maybe the council might wanna just,
I mean, I think that's more of an instrument that fits within whatever proposal, right?
Mhm.
Because you could take the full 6 million, you could take 3 million.
That's a way to finance whatever option they might choose. Okay.
Yeah, in theory, they could take Jim's proposal
No,
and
I think
take the
that's-
missing money there and
Yeah, I think
on
that's,
that.
yeah, I think that's right.
so do we have enough handouts to give to the council?
keep you guys busy for 2 weeks.
You good?
Yeah, sorry, yes. You're waiting for me.
Well, I'm just watching you write. He's writing in hieroglyphics, I want everybody to know. Okay, so the next step is having more meetings. I think we answered that.
Yeah, I just put it on there because I know there have been some concern, but it seems like we've got a couple of subcommittees going already, and we've got maybe one proposal, as long as, you know, HRC doesn't, you know, totally put the kibosh on it, and we've got a couple more we're working on, so maybe we don't need more meetings.
Well, and as long as we got a work plan, which I feel better about tonight than I have felt, everybody knows the deadline, so get your proposal in by the deadline.
Okay.
I think.
Ken, I will send you the Word document.
Just
I will send you
hand
the
it
Excel
over.
document.
Okay, perfect, that's good. Okay, so that's that?
All right, so
So the deadline is it May 1 or May 31?
end of May, so.
End of May.
Yeah,
Okay,
before
so
the
we'll
May-
have May meetings.
Before the council meeting.
May 22nd is when the council meets.
Right.
So whichever is the last roads meeting before that, which I believe.
Right.
I don't have the calendar, but
On the calendar that we put together for this, let me just bring it up real quick. There's a meeting on May. Following the council is on the May 20th.
oh, I'm sorry.
And there's a meeting of this body on the 22nd. It's sort of a wrap up. If there's any last minute feedback or something of that nature, that meeting could be canceled if need be.
That's why I had the 22nd.
So this.
Yes,
I have a question. When do we have to have the decision by council on which of the options we're going to pursue?
It depends on which option you want to pursue. Because if it's,
Well, tell me which is which. Tell
so
me
for
what-
example, if the council votes on a millage increase, that has to happen at the June meeting at the latest. Because the fiscal year starts on July 1st and that's when taxes go out.
council only, millage increase.
Correct. If it's, the council decides to increase the millage without taking it out to the vote. If it has to go out on the ballot, then proposal language is due in early August, which means the council would have to decide to finalize that language at their July meeting.
As long as we don't have to finalize it in May.
Correct. You do not. I think we scheduled it by May on purpose, so you would have at least 1 month for either of the options you would go for.
Well, we may need time to have it come back and be massaged a bit.
Well.
If we have questions, so.
Go around the table, member comments?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing. All set.
Not yet.
All set.
Well, we also. Okay, so we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Pass. Adjourn.